Bruce Forsyth's career spanned more than 7 decades, breaking the record for the longest career of any male TV entertainer.
He did everything, and he was so adored and so admired and gave us all so much joy and pleasure.
All from a man whose roots were humble, but whose ambition and talent were extraordinary. Born on the 22nd of February 1928, he was christened Bruce Forsyth Johnson, the youngest of 3 children. They grew up in this house in the North London suburb of Edmonton, after his parents had met at the local Salvation Army.
He didn't come from a showbiz background, interestingly. He was the first in his family to sort of follow that path. His mum did a bit of singing for the Salvation Army, his dad played a couple of instruments, but they didn't follow the showbiz path. But for Bruce, that's all he ever wanted to do.
Their family business had none of the dazzle associated with Bruce's eventual profession.
My father worked very, very hard. He was a garage engineer. They were wonderful parents, and probably my mother particularly had more ambition for me than I had myself.
And she would make all of his dance costumes for the competitions he took part in, sewing on each sequin painstakingly.
We weren't poor people, but we weren't rich. We were sort of in between. But they did sacrifice a lot for me in those early days. I'd never have made it without them.
He took up dance lessons at the age of 8. It was to be a long, hard slog.
All Bruce talked about was, as a child, wanting to get out on those boards. When he would talk about discipline, he would talk about how hard you had to work and that you had to do what came along and prove that you could do it step by step by step by step.
He was the sort of the 1930s Billy Elliot, I suppose, and he just worked and worked and worked.
He often told me that he would tap dance on the corrugated roof of his dad's garage in North London. He was driven, and it was very much in his psyche, and that's what powered him.
A kid did sort of have a go at me and say, "Oh, you're going to your dancing lesson? Don't be late," you know, and all this nonsense. Yeah. So I pulled him off the bike and gave him a right handful.
Bruce was never short of self-determination, and he was inspired by the talent of a great 1930s movie star.
Two of his favourites were my favourites and most dancers' favourites, Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. And he sat me down once and he said, "Let's have a look at this." And he turned on a Fred Astaire movie. We just sat there mesmerised.
I suppose his heroes throughout the whole of his life, really, were these wonderful Hollywood stars, particularly Fred Astaire, who he pretty much modelled his whole career on. The sort of dapper look, the bow tie, the dinner jacket, the sort of the wonderful dancing and singing and being funny and being an all-round entertainer. So I suppose Fred Astaire was the boy that he wanted to become.
He was 11 when his mother spotted an ideal opportunity with the world's first national broadcasting organisation, the BBC.
Since the opening of the television service in November 1936, the programs transmitted have covered a wide range of entertainment and interest. A great part of the time has been given to light entertainment, in which many cabaret and variety artists have been used.
An open audition was posted for a talent show transmitted from Alexandra Palace called Come and Be Televised. Would you like to recite Gunga Din in public? Dance? Croon? The Radio Times asked. Bruce certainly did. He told the presenter that he wanted to be famous like Fred Astaire and buy his mother a fur coat. Only the listing for Master Bruce Johnson Song and Tap Dance has survived in the archives, but the year is underlined in history. 29th of August 1939. Days later, his TV career was halted as the order came to switch off the television transmitter. The world was at war. The war years saw tragedy for many, but Bruce and his family were hit in unexpected ways. His brother-in-law died in an accident at work, and Bruce's only brother, Johnny, a 21-year-old RAF pilot, was killed in a training exercise over Scotland, his body lost at sea. A tragedy which Bruce rarely talked about publicly. Bruce carried on striving, making his first stage appearance at the Theatre Royal, Bilston, as Boy Bruce the Mighty Atom in 1943.
They were still experimenting with atoms. Atoms was the new thing. And I thought, yeah, well, I was just a kid of, 14? And I thought, what should I call myself? And I thought, yes, Boy Bruce, the Mighty Atom.
I think he was looking to make a living. And if it were possible to make a living doing the things he loved doing, which was entertaining, then that would have satisfied him. I think he would have been happy to have made a living.
Then, teaming up with a fellow performer, he placed an advert in the trade newspaper The Stage, declaring their act as vacant for variety.
I think he was just completely driven. He was a driven performer. It was almost like an addiction. It wasn't something that you felt like he had a choice of leaving behind.
Soon after the end of World War II, Bruce formed another partnership with a musician called Les Roy. Forsyth and Roy had completed a theatre tour and were encouraged enough to send a polite letter to the BBC seeking another television audition. Unknown to them, their act was deemed third-rate music hall. Not for us. No letter. But in 1947, the Windmill Theatre did take Bruce on as a solo act. This was a venue with a peculiar challenge. Performers share the stage with a backdrop of the famous Windmill Girls.
It was a thankless task performing 5 or 6 shows a day at the Windmill, because nobody wanted to hear the comedians, they just wanted to see the girls.
When you're standing up in front of 2,000 people, you've got nowhere to go. You have to survive. And that survival mechanism, I wouldn't want to do it. Most people would never consider standing in front of an audience baying to make them laugh or make them applaud or enjoy it. And, you know, he had that instinct in him that said, I will make them laugh or I'll make them applaud.
It was an ability that served him well in theatres and soon back on television screens. While performing at a seaside theatre, his talents were spotted by one of the country's leading agents, Billy Marsh.
He could play the piano, he could dance, he could sing, he could tell jokes, he could do audience participation. There's nothing he couldn't do, but he was raw, obviously, at that point. And he was a jobbing performer looking for any work he could get, whether it was the Windmill Theatre or the little tiny theatre at Babbacombe, which was not exactly a #1 theatrical date.
By 1955, the growth of television was unstoppable. Britain's first commercial channel was launched to challenge the BBC's monopoly, giving new opportunity for performers at a time when Bruce Forsyth was running short on options.
So it was hard. In fact, I did at one time, I gave myself 5 years. I thought, if I'm not going to make it within 5 years, I'm turned it in.
Really?
Yeah.
Billy Marsh sent Bruce to audition for ATV's weekly variety hit, a show broadcast on the ITV network live to millions. Sunday night at the London Palladium.
9, 8.
In 1958, 30-year-old Bruce stepped into Tommy Trinder's shoes as host. He would never look back.
So this unknown with a big chin and a grin steps onto the greatest variety stage in the world. Bruce would have been quite entitled to be nervous at that particular point. This was the beginning of his first appearance as the presenter of Sunday Night at London Palladium. There wasn't the slightest bit of nerve showing.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sunday night at the London Palladium. Hope your Easter holiday has been very gay. Toujours le politesse, hip hip hooray.
Bruce
didn't just take to the Palladium stage, he took over the Palladium stage.
But I felt so good, you know, in those few days I went to the south of France. Always wanted to go there. What a place. Cyril, isn't it marvellous there? He lives there, that boy.
The audience loved his bossy, fussy personality.
Oh, are you all right? All right. We wondered where you were. Jolly good. That's it. Where are you two from, by the way? We just find out where everybody's from. That's it. Where are you from? Where are you from? So it's a party, Where? London? Why are you late?
The middle section of the Palladium show was, in fact, a game show.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Beat the Clock.
In which he had to handle members of the audience, push them into this position, that position, throw darts at that thing, kick that ball here, tote that barge, lift that bell, you know.
No, in the air. Look, give it one like that.
His skill at dealing with the contestants would define him forever.
Now then, you have 55 seconds to beat the clock. Now you just step up here, Sophie, face the front. Behind these curtains, lots of words all jumbled up. You have to get them into a well-known phrase of saying, all right? Now, take
and the catchphrases became legendary.
Now, I'm in charge, which is one of his earliest catchphrases. And if someone hit the target particularly well, didn't he do well, which was... I mean, those catchphrases stayed with him for decades.
It's a long lane that has no turning. You've won a major prize, Bill and Sophie, and there it is, and I do hope you like it. What about that?
And I think he said during Beat the Clock to Beattie, I think the contestant was, she was a bit lippy, which was wonderful for Bruce, and he said, look, dear, I'm in charge. The following week, you couldn't get in the Palladium stage door for sacks of fan mail. To Bruce, I'm in charge, Forsyth, blah, blah, blah. And he just took off.
One of the most memorable episodes was a two-hander with Norman Wisdom, where, due to an equity strike, the whole bill needed to be improvised.
Two people doing an hour of live TV, I mean, my God, that is amazing.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sunday night at the London Palladium. With the shoo-ba-doo, shabba-doo-ba-doo.
And to do it for all the right reasons. They did it for the audience. You know, I mean, they weren't trying to sort of buck the equity union. They were doing it because they knew that X amount of millions of people would sit down on Sunday night and want to see the show. And rather than just an hour of Potter's Wheel or something, they wanted to see performers, and they got Norman and Bruce.
No, the last show we did together, you remember you told a joke, and you couldn't tell it for laughing?
Well, I think it was so funny, wasn't it? I couldn't help laughing. All right, now, I've been practising. I'll go straight to it now.
Well, I'll make a deal. If you can tell that joke without laughing, you can keep the suit on.
All right. You can't be fairer than that.
I couldn't be fairer than that.
I'll get ready.
All right, then.
They became pretty much, on that one night, national institutions. That defined them for the rest of their careers, because that was never forgotten.
I was walking down the street the other day, saw some man laying to rub me, and start me off.
I remember him doing a turn with Norman Wisdom, where they were doing a bit of wallpapering to that tune, dee-doo, dee-doo, doo-doodly-doo, dee-doo. Fag in his mouth. And I watched and I said, this bloke's brilliant.
That's one of the greatest bits of TV you can ever see.
It was genius.
The ITA personality of 1959, Bruce Forsyth.
His dedication had finally paid off. Bruce hosted at the Palladium for 3 years as accolades poured in. Though it had taken 16 years to be deemed an overnight success.
To find it all happening as quickly as this is, you know, quite bewildering. And I don't mind telling you I'm quite petrified because this is the first after-dinner speech I've ever made.
The 1960s saw Bruce seriously overworked and spoiled for choice, while his personal life saw ups and downs. In 1957, his mother had died of a stroke, and in 1961, his father suffered a fatal heart attack. A year later, Bruce's third daughter was born, and by the summer of 1964, though it would take 10 years before their divorce, he knew that his marriage to Penny was over.
We were a double act, and all of a sudden I went there to the top of the business in this country. In 6 weeks I become one of the biggest names on television. When you finally get the big break, it's difficult to still be a family man, and I think that's what happened with Penny and I.
Now one of the biggest names in television, Bruce was following his dream. In 1964, he landed the lead on the Neil Simon musical Little Me. Performing in a major production on a West End stage was something he'd always aspired to. He also hosted 2 major chat shows on opposite channels, but his sights were set higher still.
I knew Bruce wanted to be a movie star. That was his big ambition. You know how Bruce can always look at himself and he has that kind of sideways look with the chin and the nose. And I think he saw that face in a movie.
How about one of these, mate? Fell off the back of a lorry.
Do be a good chap and run away.
Would you fancy this, then?
Ah, now you have my undivided attention. What can I do for you, friend?
You ought to get over to the bookman straight away. He wants to see you. You too.
I think he fancied being James Bond, but that was ridiculous. But if Roger Moore could do it, he could have done it.
Now then, a toast. I know that wherever my little Gertie goes, she'll always find herself.
He could do it. It wasn't the fact he was just this song and dance man. He could do sort of comedy acting parts.
Enough of this nonsense. Get the book.
And he did some movies. He did Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and he did Star with Julie Andrews, but none of them were blockbusters.
That's the nearest he got to his ambition to be making Hollywood musicals, but, you know, obviously in the 1970s they weren't being made anymore. The days of Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire had long gone, and they'd moved on to actually doing film versions of stage shows.
What the hell was all that about, may I ask? Prancing down to the audience, mucking about with my material. What are you trying to do, ruin me?
They liked it, Arthur.
Bruce lost out on a role that could have changed his profile as an actor forever. That of Fagin in Lionel Bart's filmed musical, Oliver.
Ron Moody, they didn't know whether he was going to do it or not. There was some contractual thing going on, and Lionel phoned me.
With the launch of BBC Two in 1964, Britain became a 3-channel nation. Television was flourishing.
Good evening. This is BBC Two.
But Bruce's focus on big screen roles meant his small screen profile suffered. His bookings were mainly in cabaret.
I knew his brilliant all-round talents, but at that time, in the late 60s, early 70s, television was not seeking him in abundance.
During the 1970s, game shows started to replace more expensive variety shows, and in 1971, the BBC were looking for a host for a new production based upon a Dutch format. Bruce wasn't looking to host a game show, but memories of Beat the Clock stood strong. The Generation Game would become the #1 game show of the decade.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, children. Welcome to the Generation Game.
We recorded the show in the television theatre. Bruce was desperate for as much contact with his audience as he could get.
Camera 3, camera 2. All right, they're the stars. I'm the superstar, all right?
Once again, the key was his interaction with contestants and the audience.
The beauty of the Generation Game suddenly brought him to the masses.
You visited a sheik's tent in the desert with your eunuch. Oh, sorry, eunuch. Michael, eunuch. That was my fault, with your unit. And the sheik gave you gifts of beads. Oh, really? Nice, yes. And you knew it was polite to give something in return. Oh, yes.
It's a family entertainment. It was positive, it was happy. He laughed with people, never at people.
You're age 24 and you've been married to Bill for 18 months. Oh, so it's still quite fresh.
Oh, yes.
Oh, you look still glowing, you know. Tell me, does he start going out with the boys on Friday nights yet?
No, he takes me with him.
Oh, that's lovely, that's lovely. Does he bring you a cup of tea on Sunday?
No.
Oh, it started.
It's like an uncle coming to a party and having a few laughs. And we'll have a laugh together, dear, won't we? You know.
OK, you've got 1 minute, 30 seconds to do this, starting from now. Away you go. Hurry, hurry, hurry.
You had a huge mass of public viewing, you know, it just switched on to watch the Generation Game, and people talked about it. I mean, we talk about reality television. It was happening then. Oh, did you see that silly person having their hair cut? Or did you see that silly dance? Or did you see these silly people trying to make spaghetti?
Can you see anything? You're not missing much. Right. I'll give you a guide there. There's your hand. OK, so in your own time now, away you go. And each egg you get in the glass will count as 1 point.
Bruce invented his thinker pose and new catchphrases which became legendary.
Lovely. Nice to see you. To see you. But a good game. Good game, yes. Didn't she do well? I think you've got a good memory, lad. Russell, round you go there. And sit yourself up on the seat. And take the screens away, please. All right, then. Now you've got 45 seconds to have a look. 45 seconds. Lots of articles are going to pass before your eyes. On the conveyor belt tonight, we have a food hamper, a portable workbench, a sideboard hostess, a double electric oven blanket, cut crystal decanter.
You never had an off day with him. There was never a moody show where, oh, he's not very good tonight. Bruce always gave his best.
The Ronson soda stream.
The Ronson soda stream.
In what was a golden age of television, Bruce reached up to 19 million viewers, all tuning in for the familiar family entertainment.
Record vouchers and the taste. We got the soda cider. Oh, didn't he do well there? Well done. Up you come.
The game called for an assistant to bring on the contestants.
It was about also scoring. It was about also other bits where you needed a second partner to help the structure of the games.
And after a search failed to find the right candidate, Bruce called upon a woman who he'd already met at a Miss Lovely Legs competition.
Anthea's, immense good looks and personality impressed us all, but it particularly impressed Bruce. And she was chosen, and as we all know, the rest is history.
So anyway, here she is, the gorgeous... You got wrong, didn't you? The gorgeous, the lovely Anthea Redfern.
Bruce and Anthea married in 1973.
Simple, but very, very nice. Darling, I must apologise, I had to leave for the studio earlier than you this morning, so I couldn't sort of drive in the same car with you. But, I mean, you had no trouble in the traffic?
No, I didn't have any
good.
trouble
Now,
at all.
The celebrity couple would go on to have 2 daughters, making Bruce a father of 5, as his career reached new heights of popularity.
I wanna play the game with you.
And the 1970s saw Bruce capitalise on his success as one of the stars who stepped into advertising.
shave. Go and have your break, love.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right. Sticky bun. Oh, I hope it gets better. Oh, sticky bun. Sorry, this is my first day. Now,
he was extraordinary because instead of him being on stage or in a studio, we took him to places.
Welcome to the village hall, and we've just been talking about Stork Marjorie.
So he was in their space, in a way. So that's difficult, because he wasn't, in a sense, in charge, if you like.
Isn't Stork lovely?
It isn't Stork, is it?
It is. It's Stork.
What he did, he gave them Brucey. He would literally come in and do the thinker pose, or he would say, nice to see you.
He knows more about Stork than I do.
And he was extraordinary, the way he dealt with people.
They've gone Stork raving mad. You can trust Stork. It tastes good enough to eat with nothing on. All right, my loves?
By 1978, Bruce was the people's favourite, who'd now fronted the BBC's Generation Game for 7 years, beating all the competition, much to the disappointment of ITV, who wanted their star back.
Knowing Bruce's ambition to want to be more than just a game show host, to sing and dance and do all the things that he could do, I kind of worked out a format with my head of entertainment that would show off Bruce in all his glory.
Oh, I'm fed up with saying the same thing every week. It does get on my nerves. You know, I walked in, I'm going to do something different. I'll say something different.
And I sold it to him as an idea, and he gave up the Generation Game and came to us.
It's Bruce Forsyth's big night. Oh, happy day.
They promoted it as though the second Messiah was going to arrive. I mean, it was quite ridiculous.
He sang and he danced, chat show, he did everything possible that Bruce could do, he did in this show, and he loved doing it.
Well, I walked right into that one, didn't I? Yeah, the pretty lady. Yeah.
Actually, the real reason we came to London was not just to do that piddly show at the Palladium, no.
No.
And merely because we wanted to peddle our wares on Portobello Road, no. No, the real reason we came to London was...
What was the real reason?
I just had to meet Mary Whitehouse just once. Before I die. Well, I've met her, and you see...
Meanwhile, back at the BBC, Larry Grayson was doing well as the new host of the Generation Game.
Shut that door.
Larry's quirky style meant audiences stuck with the show.
I can't find the pie.
Over on LWT, it wasn't going so well for Bruce's big night.
Get the whole of the network together tonight.
The problem was the press, the tabloids, to set up a David and Goliath story. Larry popped up as the host, and it was Larry versus Bruce, and there was only going to be one winner of that in the press's mind, because they will always side with the underdog.
Despite the star quality, it was a ratings flop.
Would you care to be mother?
What does that mean? Mother. Why, are you going to be dad? What's going to happen now?
We had to take it off after a year because it was just so painful for Bruce. He was so loyal, though. He was so wonderfully loyal, because he could easily have turned on me or London Weekend and said, they talked me into this, they haven't delivered. Well, you know, he could have got himself out of it by blaming us, but he didn't. He so believed in the show.
I'll tell you something, Parkinson's never done this, has he?
Oh, this is great.
Have you heard of Parkinson?
No.
As the chat show failed, so did Bruce's second marriage, with Anthea citing show business as the third party in our marriage. Bruce, the family entertainer, experienced negative press, which upset him so much he handed back his Sun newspaper television awards. Undaunted in 1979, Bruce decided to follow a lifetime ambition by heading off to Broadway to present a one-man show at the Winter Garden Theatre. The show drew on his many and varied talents.
Bruce could dance with Sammy Davis, he could sing a duet with Nat King Cole, he could play the piano with Errol Garner. I mean, there was nothing he couldn't do, and he was the British boy showing the Americans that we're as good as they are. If he'd been born in America, I think he would have been a massive global star.
Over the course of his career, Bruce released more than 7 albums.
Now you're here, and now I know just where I'm going. No more doubts or fears.
And always remained a dancer.
Bruce was what they called a hoofer. He did an American tap, which was very close to the ground.
We didn't like English tap. We didn't like it going the whole up and down English tap thing.
You looked like you were standing still, but you were making these most incredible sounds with your feet. He was absolutely full of rhythm.
After Bruce's Broadway stint, LWT gave him a dream commission. A duet with an international American star, the ultimate song and dance man, Sammy Davis Jr., who'd also become Bruce's friend and hero.
Look at me and look at you. Well, I just thought I'd better get out here quickly.
Why's that?
Well, you know, because I know you too well, Bruce, and I just wanted to get a couple of things straight in the beginning of the show, if you don't mind, from one friend to another, okay? First of all, these are the definite no-nos during the time we're here, okay? There will be no short jokes. There will be no jewelry jokes. There will be no one-eye jokes.
Bruce working with Sammy was Bruce working with, from his point of view, an idol. From the audience's point of view, an equal.
You and I are Bruce and Sammy. I'm so spruce and you're so hammy. All the same, we go together like gin and vermouth.
Hold it, hold it, hold it! Yeah, you did it again.
What's that?
You did it. You're doing something different, Sam.
What do you mean?
It's some vocal trick or movement, and you know I do an impression of you, and all of a sudden you keep changing your style.
And Sammy was enormously impressed by Bruce. I mean, here's an English guy who's really up to it.
And I tell you what, Bruce kept right up with Sammy Davis.
In the same year, the British public got Brucey back in a role they were most familiar with, hosting a new game show for LWT.
Our dolly dealers are dying to dish out the cards. So away you go, my darlings. There we are. Okay. Now all we need are our players.
Once again, his easy manner with the contestants struck home. Play Your Cards Right became an enduring television hit, one presented by Bruce for 13 years.
All right, Bob, well, welcome to Play Your Cards Right.
I come from Sligo in Ireland. I now live in Wood Green. I'm a London taxi driver and I play golf.
Oh, no. You didn't leave your meter running outside, did you?
Yes, I did.
Because we're not paying for that, you know. Anyway, give my love to Wood Green. I'm an Edmonton boy, you know. Just around the corner from there. Lovely. Well, welcome.
Because he was connected to people, and that's what they loved about him, because he really was terrific with contestants.
Carol, and who are you, my darling?
I'm Carol Kennedy.
Carol Kennedy, a very famous family. Yes, my darling?
I'm from Manchester.
Yes, yes.
I'm a nurse and I work in a biscuit factory.
A nurse? A nurse in a bit? What do you put, splints on broken biscuits?
It's his fundamental talent in actually being able to talk to individuals and involve them in the fun and mock them slightly, but not too much.
Lower. Lower than an ace. A 6. Now this is for to win the game, so it's a bit of a chance. What do you think?
I freeze.
You freeze!
Here too, Bruce invented many memorable catchphrases.
Right then, okay. What do points make? You're so right. And our star prize tonight, Bob, is a car. So that's what you're going for, but there are other lovely things on the way, believe me.
Strange thing about your career has been that no sooner do you seem to succeed enormously in one phase, like, for instance, Sunday Night at the London Palladium and Beat the Clock.
Yes.
Then, having achieved that, you give it up.
Yes, well,
and you
you
sort
see,
of disappear. You did for...
we all have peaks.
Yeah.
You see, you can't expect your career to be all one big peak. That's the kind of person I am. I hate to feel too safe and too secure doing something, especially if I feel that I'm in a rut and I've got to get on with the next thing. That's me.
So what is the next thing?
And Miss World 1975 is Miss...
After his second marriage had failed, Bruce had been happily single. That is, until 1980, when he met a former Miss World for Puerto Rico, Wilnelia Merced.
I was never going to get married. The last thing I was going to do was get married. I was going to be Mr. Frisky for the rest of my life, but I saw her and I just felt like a ton of bricks.
I remember him telling me for the first time that he'd met Winnie, and she was this stunning-looking girl, about 23 or 4, whatever she was. And I was a bit wary, you know. He was now sort of on his third wife if they got together.
They married in 1983.
A waiter at the golf club found out that I was Winnie's, as I call her, Winnie's husband. And from then on, he called me Senor Mundo, Mr. World.
Their boy, Jonathan Joseph, known as JJ, was born 4 years after they wed. The birth of Bruce's only boy made him a father of 6. Winnie was the woman he would spend the rest of his life with.
I didn't think it would last, and I think 99% of his friends didn't think it would last. They thought he was being silly. And it's turned out to be one of the great love affairs of my lifetime.
And there was a real kind of old-fashioned romance that just seemed to permeate their relationship on a daily basis.
She would be at the show every week. She would often stay for the dress rehearsal. She'd stay all the way through to live shows. She was constantly by his side. And they absolutely just adored each other.
My darling Winnie, he would always say. And his children, and his grandchildren. You know, he had so much love for his family.
She's been a wonderful, wonderful homemaker. She's got on well with his children. They've had a wonderful marriage. They're just a couple, and they're lovely.
I've never loved anyone the way I love you. How could I, when I was born to be just yours?
They were incredibly happy years for him with Winnie, and he deserved it. He was a good man.
In the latter third of his life, Bruce Forsyth achieved greater and greater happiness. He would also spend more time playing the sport he adored.
Oh, he loves his golf. He was slightly frustrated. He'd like to have played better. But he was about 8 or 9 handicap. He was a good, steady performer, and he liked to play properly, and he would have loved to have played a bit better. He took it very seriously.
OK, quiet on the tee, please.
Lived right on Wentworth Golf Club, and you'd drive into his home, and you put your golf clubs on his buggy with him, and then you'd drive down a path, and the gates would open straight onto the course. And off we'd go.
And he discovered he could get up in the morning, go to a golf course, breathe fresh air for 2 or 3 hours, have a bit of lunch or whatever, and nobody bothered them, you see. You could be famous at golf clubs and you were accepted, and that's the way it was, and it's still like that pretty much today.
And halfway up the 18th hole, he'd phone home and say, we're 10 minutes away. And when we got back to his house, bottle of champagne, lovely little hors d'oeuvres, and I used to sit in his bar and I used to look across, and there was photographs of him with Bob Hope, with Bing Crosby, with Dean Martin. You know, this man has had such a wonderful, wonderful life, and it's just marvellous to just reminisce and think about the joy that he brought not only to me, but to absolute millions of people.
Bruce's career in television lasted more than 7 decades. Key to his longevity was his immense self-discipline.
He was always very fit. He was a size 32 waist, or I mean, it was tiny, and the jackets were all out of Savile Row. They were immaculately fitting jackets. Everything was pressed immaculately. The trousers, he just was immaculate.
He had a regime that I, 20 years younger, couldn't keep up with. Exercise, deep breathing, swimming.
I never saw him unshaved. I never saw him with dirty shoes, never saw him with mucky fingernails. He was absolutely tip-top, and he was very careful with himself, sleeping, resting, eating.
One of the things that Bruce used to do, which is really incredible. He used to turn, now in dance, you call it a chaîné or a pirouette, and when you're young, you spot, you know, you bring your head round to the front all the time, and you never get dizzy. Bruce kept up that spinning to the right and to the left to determine that he would stay forever strong and on balance.
He understood that you've got to look after yourself. And he found a regime for himself where he could stay in the best possible shape and keep going for as long as he did.
When most people are contemplating retirement, the 1990s saw Bruce return to the newly revived Generation Game. 62-year-old Bruce appeared barely changed from his younger self.
Gentlemen and children, welcome to the Generation Game. It's nice to see you, Yes, and do you know it's been 13 years since I last did the Generation Game, and I was so flattered when the BBC asked me to come back to do it. You know, but all the pleading and the begging and the grovelling. Oh, I hope I didn't belittle myself.
The boys sleep with Boogie every night and wakes them up the same way in the early bright. They clap their hands and stamp their feet because they know how it plays when someone gives him a beat. He makes the cover jump when he plays reveille. He's the boogie woogie boogie boy. Company B, the boogie woogie boogie boy of Company B.
Then, in 1995, he launched The Price is Right, another game show that would run and run.
Let's meet the stars of our show.
Monica Krujinska, come on down! Julie McGuckin.
He celebrated his 70th birthday surrounded by friends and admirers on television in a live edition of Sunday Night at the London Palladium.
Listen to these people. They can't all be wrong. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sunday Night at the London Palladium. 40 years ago, this show was such a big hit, and I was proud to be a part of it.
Bruce's record in show business meant he could have chosen to live a comfortable, quiet retirement. In 2003, watching television with Winnie at home would change any chance of that.
There we are. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Whoa. We're watching the show, because we always watch it. It's such a great show. And Winnie turned to me, she said, you know, you could do that show, because they change the host every week. I said, I was just thinking the same thing. They change him every week, so why not?
He's not your first idea of current affairs commentator, is he? Let's be honest.
It's definitely time for... Now, these are the cards that the Americans... Please. This is satire.
I mean, what followed was, the most extraordinary sort of procession of bad taste that we would never have got away with anyone else. Bruce Forsyth doing Play Your Iraqi Cards Right with a group of, essentially, Iraqi war criminals.
It's a middle card here. It's a middle card, so this is difficult.
I never saw this programme.
I know, that's why it's such fun for me.
It was just bonkers and amazing and incredible and very funny.
Tony Blair insists that weapons of mass destruction will eventually be found in Iraq. Well, it would be nice to see them, I've been
waiting 14 years for the show to be like this. I'm having the time of my life.
For Paul, he was the, the flickering star of his childhood, this black and white person, come from the Palladium, and he was in front of him.
What was the good news for David Beckham this week?
Oh, he's going to be an OBE.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, that doesn't seem much, really, does it? Have you got an OBE?
Yes, I have.
That's what I mean. It's...
Bruce, Ian's not necessarily a permanent member of the show. I think you should bear that in mind.
I will, but...
The new direction that we're taking.
Yes, exactly.
And the way he did it was just brilliant. He put his own twist on everything he did, which is genius. He always stayed true to himself.
That was really the beginning of Bruce Forsyth again. It was the start of the new Bruce, and it really felt like, looking back on it, that it was a moment of history.
Bruce's appearance on Have I Got News for You brought him to a whole new audience.
There was this man who was almost 80 then, appearing in or fronting a modern satire show and completely getting it and embracing it and being rather brilliant on it.
What a lovely audience!
In 2004, the then BBC head of entertainment was looking for a suitable host for a primetime Saturday night show.
After 20 years in show business, and I suggested this to him and explained what the format was, a sort of pro-celebrity come dancing, and he started laughing. And I said to him, "Are you laughing at us or with us?" And he said, "With you." He said, "That is a genius idea."
Strictly Come Dancing would become one of the biggest Saturday night television spectaculars ever. At the centre was Bruce Forsyth, the key figure between the audience, performers and the judges.
Please welcome your hosts, Bruce Forsyth and Tess Daly.
The first time that I met Bruce was through Strictly. And he was so relaxed that he made the rest of us relax, because myself and the crew were all a little bit on pins in the early days, because we were, he was just such a legend.
It's nice to twirl you, Nice! And it's so nice to be working with you, Tess.
Oh, Bruce, well, I'm so excited to be working with you.
Really?
Yes, but I must admit I am a little bit nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous, dear. Forget you're working with a superstar.
Bruce. No one handled live television quite like he did. He was in charge of that studio floor.
Angela, I was watching you very carefully. Will you just face me? And just smile. And face the front.
So he's a wonderful way of making people feel comfortable and what I call knockabout stuff, And it never puts you down or makes you feel awkward or makes you feel uncomfortable. It's all wonderfully drawing in.
And on a personal level, his friendship has meant so much to me. Because he was always there with a word of advice if I needed it, and he really supported me and welcomed me with open arms on the show. And here he was, a legend, and he couldn't have been kinder. And I always really appreciated that, because he made me feel so welcome, and we just had so many good times working together.
After all, it's time to meet the stars of our show.
Yes!
Bruce kept the integrity of the show. It was always about the dancing and the competition. It didn't become slapstick and just comedic. He kept the integrity of the show always.
Ladies and gentlemen, we give you tonight's competitors. Couple number one, BBC breakfast anchorwoman Natasha Kaplinsky and her partner Brendan Cole.
Bruce was just so supportive, so understanding, and gave me a confidence that even if I fell over, he'd be there to pick me up. He had the most extraordinary ability to really empathise and understand, and I guess that's why everybody just loved him so much.
Natasha, I'm afraid I don't agree with any of the other judges. I thought you were dull.
Bruce, always supported the contestants and, you know, would turn on you about how you could say this, how you could say that.
It would take 6 months no, your time's up. Your time's up. Your time's up. Well, that's what the judges thought. But don't worry, you're the best. You're the best. I said it right from the start.
Bruce always used to say, "You're my favourite." And somehow, even though you knew he said it to everybody else, you felt like he really meant it.
OK, my darling, now, you're going to finish up in Vegas, isn't it, about news reading? Not reading the news, you'll be making the news. But is she easy?
Bruce just understands how to play to the crowd in the best possible way. He's a performer from the top of his head to the tip of his toes.
After more than 7 decades on screen and a publicly supported campaign, he was honoured with a knighthood by the Queen in 2011.
Sir Bruce Forsyth Johnson for services to entertainment and to charity.
I can honestly say on my way here I was very nervous and thinking, is anything going to happen? Is this really happening? Is this really me? Am I getting this wonderful honour? The Queen actually asked me how long I'd been in show business. When I said 70 years, she was very shocked.
Sir Bruce Forsyth, an all-round entertainer whose career reflected the progression of British television itself.
Is there anybody here, you know, who's never seen me on television but never before seen me in the flesh? Would you mind putting up your hands if you've never seen me in the flesh? Oh, quite a few, oh yes. Now, would you mind putting up your hands if you're regretting it already?
He brought something new to a television screen that nobody else had really done or may ever do again.
A proud family man who leaves 6 children and many grandchildren.
I'd just like to say, Bruce, that you're not only a great all-round performer, you're a great all-round human being.
Amusing, gossipy, silly, nonsensical, seeing the silly side of life, and being considerate.
A most generous, kind, humorous colleague. And I certainly, at any meeting that I've ever had with him, ever forgot that he was a star.
Never short of energy or enthusiasm, Bruce Forsyth, the consummate professional, in a 3-piece suit, with a smile and an ever-ready catchphrase.
Nice to see you! To see you!
With Bruce, we've got so many fabulous footage of him performing, of him comparing, of his jokes, of his music. It's brilliant.
Every room he walked into, he just lit it up. And I'll always be grateful for those years with Brucey. Just being a little part of a very long life.
He once said that if he lived to be 100, he would book the London Palladium for the celebration.
Honoured and thrilled to have been able to, you know, consider Bruce my friend. And when your hero becomes your friend, it's just sort of perfection, really.
A showman to the end.
He was always Brucey. From Sunday Night at the Palladium to Strictly, he's still the Bruce Forsyth we all know and love. His achievements will never, ever be bettered.